softball, but just want to start and let everyone know who you are, and rather it come from me. Let's highlight. Yeah, it'd be great to hear kind of your story and how your sort of journey and the arc that got you to the point that you are today, which is SVP of HubSpot.
Sure. Andre, first of all, thank you for having me. It's really an honor. And it's obviously especially enjoyable and rewarding to be able to do this with you, with my cousin. You've been, right by my side for this entire journey. And so seeing your leadership with the C100 and seeing you're bringing these stories to the community is particularly heartwarming for me. And I'm particularly proud of all that you do for entrepreneurs in Canada and the United States. Uh,
Thank you, man.
a little about myself, of course. A little about myself. I born and raised in Toronto, and I moved to the United States for college when I was 17. And through a series of different activities, you go into more detail, navigated from investment banking to law and to consulting and to tech. And I've been in tech now for the last almost 15 years. And I am currently the Senior Vice President of Corporate Development and Business Development at HubSpot. HubSpot's a publicly traded CRM for scaling companies. And in my role, I cover corporate development for all of our acquisitions and HubSpot Ventures, our investments, and then all of our partnerships, which include strategic partnerships, app and marketplace partnerships, as well as all of our go-to-market partnerships, like channel partnerships as well.
I know there's like a lot to go through your background. Thanks for the very, very short summary. I would love to double click just a little bit on any things you can draw out. How did being Black shape your journey in some regard to where you are, both from an opportunity perspective and potentially on from a challenge perspective as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's shaped everything, right? So being Black is something that it's a critical part of my identity. It shapes how I see the world and how I interact with the world. It's been like that since as long as I can remember, and that has its attributes and benefits, and it has some challenges as well. And it's impacted some very specific steps I've taken in my life. One of them being when I decided to leave Canada for the United States, and I didn't just leave for school in the United States, but I left to go to a historically Black college. It was a very intentional move. I applied to one school when I was leaving from my school in Canada, and I wanted to go somewhere where I would have classmates that looked like me and had teachers and professors who looked like me, so that when I was speaking on the behalf of Andrew Lindsay, and I wasn't speaking on the behalf of my race, and I wasn't speaking on behalf of a larger group. I could be in the majority for the first time in my life. And that was an incredibly formative experience for me, being able to think of myself truly as being an individual who didn't have any of the weight of representing something else in a conversation, and also having a series of role models and peers. When I looked at them and looked at how they looked at the world and how they experienced the world, it's very similar to how I did, right? In that when I walked into a room, people looked at them the same way that they looked at me. And I had never really had that before. When I had teachers and I had professors, they didn't look at me and have any kind of preconceived notions about what I could or could not do, whether it was in the classroom or if it was on the athletic field. This is Andrew Lindsay. He's just one of many who are all the same. And so that was one of the more formative experiences that I had
I love that you
going to
highlight
Howard.
that, and if you don't mind to just to go a little further on the experience at Howard, being a Black Canadian, having grown up in
Yep.
Canada, and if there's any highlights or differences you found of how your peers viewed the world potentially differently or maybe the same. It sounded as though there was obviously like a lot of similarities that you just highlighted. But
Yep.
I'm curious if there were any differences just coming from Canada versus other parts that
There
I'm
were.
assuming the student body came from.
Yeah, and Howard's a truly global institution where there are students coming from the United States, certainly, but the Caribbean, Africa, Europe, Asia, really all over the world. And one of the things coming from Toronto that was a little bit different was Toronto is the most diverse city in the world. right? And it has diversity in nationality and national origin, has diversity in language, diversity in religion, and that diversity is very different than in the United States. And going to Howard, there certainly wasn't the racial diversity, but there was a different type of diversity that took some getting used to, the diversity of the Black community. So that was something that I had some experience with in Canada, with the diversity from Black Canadians from different places, but not nearly as much as at Howard. That's one certain thing. And then two is that the experience of Black American history has vestiges that are very influential to society in the United States today. It's a very different history than the Canadian history, and the the racism and slavery of the original sin of the United States. It is what powered the real formation of the American economy. When you look back at the power of the slave industry and the slave industry back in the South, and how it drove changes all the way through the Civil War, how it led to post Reconstruction, and how it led to Jim Crow, and so on. It's a critical part, and it's woven into the fabric of the country of the United States, and it's woven in such a way that the Black experience is a very challenging, a very fraught experience, and that's very different than the majority of Black experience in Canada, where most of the experiences comes from immigrants. And my family and our family were immigrants from Jamaica, and so we didn't have quite the same history in Canada that most Black Americans who have been in the United States for many generations have. They don't have the experience, or I certainly didn't have the experience where I can trace back my lineage on a land in a state back to being a slave holding place where those slaveholders could be my peers, could be my neighbors, right? And that kind of experience is very different. I didn't have the experience where my parents didn't have the right to live in certain neighborhoods, or didn't have the right to have some of the basic things like drink at the same water fountain, or access the same schools, and so on, that some of my peers did at Howard. And so my experience was very different from theirs in some ways, but at the same time, there were, I'd say, more commonalities and differences.